Hey, what's up, guys? Little man, big opinion here. So, I'm bagging candy and giving you some news updates because I got to multitask here. And I don't think I need to do another video talking about. I should probably scoot it a little closer. Don't think I need to do another video talking about the chemical fire at a plant down here in Texas, but if you haven't seen anything on that, there is a shelter in place order, and there's not much more updates on that right now. The little bit that I didn't mention in the video is people are suspecting that it might be a cyber attack because at the same time there's also payroll systems that are down, and I can update you and give you more information on that when there's more information to be given. A couple of the other things that I'm seeing in the news is Israel is pushing further and further into Gaza, even though there's different groups calling, they say the word ceasefire. I've also heard people say tactical pause or uh, a stopping, just to kind of let people get out. And so that whole situation, it seems like Israel is going through with what they said they were going to do, and they are, marching through. They did discuss, basically, creating a martial law in Gaza, and they didn't say a amount of time that they would, they didn't put a timeline on when that would end. What I did find interesting, and I haven't made a video about it, is it seems like the whole immigration issue, whether you want to call it illegal immigration, asylum seekers, whatever you want to call it, in Chicago, they had discussed doing a public hearing on it, and some people came in and disrupted the hearing, talking about, enough is enough, and we can't keep taking in people, even though Chicago has still affirmed that they are going to be a sanctuary city. It seems like the residents of Chicago are finally starting to feel the impacts of what a lot of the border cities are dealing with and the border states are dealing with. So this comes about a week after New York kind of said the same thing. They're overstrained. There's too many people. And a lot of the major Democratic cities are, their people are turning on them. As a prepper, that lives in Texas, I would say that what our governor is doing is better than nothing. I'm not in politics, so I'm not going to be the person that can tell you the perfect right or wrong answer to dealing with it. But what I can say is we have a lot of states with a population under 9 million people. And that's what they're saying is the number of people that have come into the U.S. since the new president has taken office. And it's constraining resources. I teach government, and talking to the kids about the national debt and showing them the debt clock and not being able to give an answer on whether or not the deficit spending is going to go up or down. And, all of this election stuff going on right now, and there's different people talking about how they're going to alleviate the economy in their states and how they're going to try to get things back on the right path. Again, as a prepper, the only thing I can say is you can focus on your own spending. You can focus on your spending locally. And, I say that at the same time that a lot of, local bonds and, just other local spending bills that people voted on, a lot of that stuff failed from what I've seen. And I think a big part of that has to deal with the economy is kind of improving. We're not posting 8 and 9% inflation rates anymore, but the most recent one was 3.7%. And, to get any level of, back to normal, we definitely need to see some negative inflation numbers. And unfortunately, I don't see that happening. So you should be stacking your food to the rafters. And even if you spent $100 on food pre 2020, then you've already saved yourself about $20, because having almost double-digit inflation in 1 year, and then all of the years past that, it being almost above 4%, we're looking at about 17 or 18% inflation since 2020. So if you haven't started prepping food, I really think that should be on the top of a lot of your list, because if you start prepping food next year, you're basically going to, if the inflation rates hold, you're spending $103 for the same amount of food that you were spending $100 on this year. And if you continue to wait, I don't see inflation getting below 2%, regardless of who's in office and who you vote for. So the only thing you really do is keep yourself squared away. And when you keep yourself squared away, you have set up your own insurance policy for the masses that haven't put anything else aside as their rainy day fund. So that was, Chicago residents explode with anger over migrants' sanctuary policy. They are not listening to us. So that's fairly big news. Staying out of sports. And, it's looking like 2024 politically is shaping up to be another nail biter, regardless of which side you're leaning toward. And it's also looking like, at least a year out, that we will probably end up with a Republican in office. And, that Republican is probably going to be, Trump, unless something major changes. I can feel a little bit more optimistic this time around, because I've heard a lot more rhetoric about, cutting spending and, like a scorched earth style policy on shrinking departments. And, at least at the federal level, I read somewhere where they can cut up to 75% of the employees from a department without having some sort of congressional law made. And the other kind of useful thing that I see is we are seeing more and more of a push by the Republicans for single subject spending. The new guy, Johnson, has talked heavily about it. That's how he got the votes necessary to do so. And it'd be really interesting to see on the political side of things where, certain Republicans or certain Democrats side on different things. The way I explain it to my students is, these big bills, let's say there's 10 things inside of this bill, and you strongly support 6 of the 10 things. And 2 of the things you absolutely hate. And then the other 3, maybe you wouldn't go about handling it that way. The way it's set up, you almost want to vote yes for it to get your 5 or 6 things through, and you kind of deal with, your other issues later. And there's people on both sides of the aisle that, support, different things. It's not every single, Republican or Democrat in lockstep, supporting everything, and even the bills that they help write, because they have to set up compromise. But the other nice thing about single subject spending is it helps us, I think, more easily track where that money's going, how we're spending it. There's more, arguing and compromising and negotiating on how much each of these different departments would get. And from my understanding, each different department, they'd spend a week or two, hashing out its spending and where the money's going to go to, and they've got time to debate on those issues. And I think it would help us politically, which would probably lessen all of these videos that I see from all of these other prepping channels talking about, the Civil War is getting closer. And I understand I am, just as guilty, because I see something that looks like it would increase the chances of a civil war, and I talk about it, and I try to, keep y'all informed. So maybe that might happen, maybe it won't. But I do think all of our, worries about political unrest and, riots and things getting out of hand, needing to be prepared for these things, I think every 4 years it kind of intensifies and, gets worse than it was in the last cycle. There's a lot of people that think, this next election, regardless of which side you're picking, it's going to be the boiling over point. So if the left wins, then that's going to be the boiling over point for the right. And if the right wins, that's going to be the boiling over point for the left. And, if that's the case, we're about a year out. And I would say, unless, something drastic changes in the polling where it looks like, one person is going to, sure-handedly win the election. It's going to come down to the day of, us figuring out at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, who the next president is. I can see a lot of issues with, political unrest. So if you haven't already, you're a year out. One of my upcoming videos, I'm going to talk about the workout routine that I have been doing. And I would say it is somewhat of a success because I donate plasma and they got like a little notification on their stuff that last year, November, I was at 155. And this year, November, I was at 139. And so when there's more than a 10-pound difference in your weight, they want to make sure, everything's fine. And, the only thing I've been doing is eating better and exercising 3 to 5 times a week. And I'm missing one thing on the table that I need. But we are, like I said, 1 year out from the election. A lot of things can change. But if you haven't started already, here's me saying it again. You should definitely be exercising 3 times a week at a bare minimum. A lot of Americans are obese, overweight, and I feel like I can say that because I figured out I was diabetic 3 years ago. Because 3 years ago, I weighed 187 pounds at 5'2". Now I'm at 139. A lot of my numbers are doing so much better. I'm taking a lot less medicine. And it has kept me prepared physically as a prepper. So I'm going to just kind of talk about what I exercise, how I exercise, and, keep up with that. That way, if you don't know what you should maybe be doing, maybe you'll start doing it. Maybe it's your motivation. This guy did it, so I can do it too. And for the most part, it's free or very, very inexpensive. And as a prepper, I saw this meme the other day where it showed this guy who was very much overweight, and he had all of this nice gear and all these food supplies and stocks and everything, and it said 2023 loot drop. If you don't have the money that you would like to spend on prepping, if you're prepping on a budget, that is probably the easiest thing that you can do that will give you some sort of edge in the game is exercising. The next thing you can do is you can watch videos like these that keep you informed on the news. It's free to spend 15, 20 minutes a day watching the news, reading articles, listening to these kind of videos. On my drive to work, I'm listening to, news podcasts because I have to do it anyway, so I'm multitasking. When I'm taking a shower, if I'm not listening to music, I'm keeping up with the news. I have downloaded several of the different news sites on my phone, and I get the notifications. And when they post stuff that's not relevant, they're talking about, football or, a murder in West Virginia that doesn't pertain to me, I can just swipe that notification away. But, hearing about that chemical fire, I got the notification and had read the article that was released, 5 minutes before. I'm checking the weather, making sure, I know we're getting a cold front Thursday night, and it's supposed to get down into the 30s. So me prepping is spending an extra 5 minutes bringing more firewood into the house, just so I don't have to go out and deal with it in the cold. Other things that we can do is, see, I just got another notification. This is talking about, Russia launched 87 missiles into the Kherson region, which, from what I kind of read about an article before that, is a lot of the Ukraine-Russia conflict has ground to a stalemate. And we're still talking about, certain people are still talking about wanting to send aid over there, or sending more money, which kind of goes back to what I said earlier, where I was talking about, the deficit and, the U.S. debt and everything that's going on with that. And, the money that we want to send over to help Israel and the money that we're sending to Gaza. And it's looking like, I don't remember who says it, but a lot of the times they just say, the right is just speed bumps. So instead of something getting approved right away, it takes them, a few weeks or a few months to approve it. So if they're spending money and, inching us closer, the big topics right now are World War III and, getting prepared for that, and, Yannet, whatever the Secretary of the Treasury lady's name is, Janet Yellen, she is talking about the U.S. being able to fund 2 wars. And what I would say to that is we can't fund our own stuff, and maybe we should slow down on the money that we're sending overseas. I think I said that in a lot nicer way than Risky Crispy would say it. And, I try to be as, nonpartisan as possible when talking about this stuff, because I think prepping is not a right or a left wing issue. I think it's a everyone issue. And hopefully me giving you these news stories and talking about this kind of stuff can keep you better informed so that you can make those kind of decisions to protect yourself and your family. Like what I'm doing right now. I'm sitting here bagging candy that we can sell at a gun show so that hopefully we can spend more money on prepping items, because the inflation is at 3.7%. And this is our extra source of income that allows us to, continue to live our normal lives, but also let me do my prepping stuff. I've got a bit of raw footage from the last time I went out to my bug out location, but I don't think I comfortably recorded enough stuff to add it or release it in one video, because it's mostly just me cutting down a couple of trees, and they're cedar trees, and stripping them down. But another thing that is very useful, and it kind of goes back into the new stuff, is talking with the different people in your MAG or your mutual assistant group. I don't catch every single news story that's out there. When I released my video talking about an ammo shortage, even if I can't buy the ammo all the time, I'll at least go look and see what's on the shelves and kind of, mentally jot down, hey, it looks like the 9mm that's coming into Academy is slowing down. And then I can go look and see if there's any news articles talking about that, which there are several. And a lot of that ammo shortage that I see coming and that several comments made about it showed that in their areas, ammo was either getting more expensive, which is, how they say we're not getting as much, but we still want to make a level of profit, or they saw a decreased amount, or they had friends or family that they knew in different areas, and that's what the comments do. I've got a friend down in McAllen, Texas, and I've got family in Illinois, and a friend that's in Colorado, and just all the different people that I've known and met throughout the years. It's very easy for me to message them and just say, hey, the next time you go to Academy, just look at you don't have to buy anything. Just look at the shelves and let me know what your ammo situation is. And many of them have gotten back to me and said, there's less on the shelves, or it's more expensive, or I've got a friend that works at this retail store, and they told me, we got 100 less boxes in the shipment than the last one, and we don't know if we're going to get another shipment in or not. So, it kind of gives, a little bit of a heads up, because, if you're planning for your prepping, you were, planning to get, 5 boxes of this for your spending for prepping that month, maybe you want to go ahead and do that, sooner rather than later, so that you don't miss out on adding that to your preps, which is something that I think is, pretty important. I think the best prepping videos that I have are anytime that I talk about guns and ammo. And, it's good, bad, indifferent. Everyone's an expert in the comments when it comes to that kind of stuff. But what I can say is all of your prepping shouldn't just go into, guns and ammo. You should also put stuff into your beans and your bullets and your bacon and your bandages and your binoculars. I'm thinking of prepping stuff that starts with a B that you should probably be prepping and stocking up on. All right, let's keep looking at the news. Let's see what our next article is. That doesn't look all that important. What I would also say, and it's helped me pay attention to the news a little bit better, and it's helped keep me a little bit partisan about it, is using Google News. They put basically everyone's news stories in there, and it lets you know who wrote the article. That way, if one site that people think is biased writes an article, then you can go check someone else's and kind of verify your sources to make sure that you're not just getting one narrative from something. So this is saying Michigan Democrats win 2 mayoral races but lose full command of state government. That's kind of misleading. Basically, the Michigan government's sitting at 54-54. for their House of Representatives, meaning there should be some sort of tiebreaker for that. I haven't looked at, all of the voting that's gone on, but what I can say is, there's wins on both sides, and both sides are talking about how, this shows a shift in the culture war. And for me, as far as I'm concerned, the one good thing in Texas that I voted for that didn't pass was upping the age of our judges to mandatory retire from 75 to 79. That failed. So right now, our judges have to retire at 75, either at the end of their term or there's some clause based on how much time they have left if they get elected. And it just kind of shows that, there's some things that we are politely telling you it's time to retire. And that's the only thing that failed out of the Texas propositions. That chemical fire I was talking about, there was an update from 36 minutes ago. Chemical fire, Texas. Shelter-in-place orders lifted in Shepherd, Texas counties after Sound Resource Solutions ignited on, they're talking about a farm to market road. The fire has been contained. One person was injured. I didn't see that the first time I talked about it. They're still working on putting out hotspots, and they're doing a cleanup and an investigation. So it started at 8:17. 1,000-pound propane tank got lit. They're calling it a freak accident. There was a forklift incident, but it looks like they have lifted the shelter-in-place order. So when I first saw this at about 9 o'clock this morning, I think 9 o'clock is when they issued the shelter-in-place order. So that would mean they had a shelter-in-place for about 8.5 hours. So in that video, I talked about, the things that you should have in place if you have a shelter-in-place order issued as a prepper. And so those things were, food, water, security, shelter. And I kind of went into a little bit of details on, if you were at work or at your house, or, if you were traveling when they issued the shelter-in-place. But that's a real world incident on why I'm a prepper. And every time I see news articles like that, it just reaffirms why I make these videos and, share the information that I have with y'all. Because this happened about 4 hours away from where I'm at, so it wasn't an issue for me. But I do have, friends and family that live kind of close to Houston. And my grandmother and wife went on a trip kind of somewhere in the area. And so I don't know if they were affected by it at all. They didn't mention anything to me about it. I shared the article, and they kind of said, okay, well, we're about 2.5 hours away from that. So I don't think it was an issue for them. And, the few friends and family that I do have in the area, I know one of them let me know that, I informed them that it was going on, and they were able to just GTFO out of the area. And so they just didn't have to deal with it because they didn't want to just have to sit in their house. But they were informed well enough in advance that they had the ability to bug out of that situation. So good on them. And that's just another reason why we should stay informed on these issues. So that was an update, and I will probably put a comment update in the video that I did. Don't care about that or that or that. The third Republican debate is tonight. Don't really care about that. I'm glad that passed because I live in the state of Texas and went through that situation. Texas voters overwhelmingly approved measure greenlighting more fossil fuel development. I don't remember what the vote on it or the vote numbers on 65% to 35%. And it essentially, we set aside $5 billion to go into expanding our infrastructure for natural gas and other fossil fuel things. And I think a lot of it has to deal with the fact that our infrastructure is getting a bit old, and a lot of people were affected by that big freeze that happened a couple years ago. I was living in Corpus at the time, and we got our electricity from the windmills that are outside of Corpus. That being said, it got cold enough that those quit working, and it made me feel really glad that we lived in a townhome with a fireplace and that I had about 3 days worth of firewood, stored on my little patio thing, and the sleeping bags and all the other prepping stuff that I was able to do, because it really didn't bother us. My wife still talks about that evening, or not that evening, that week. I think we didn't have power for 5 days, I believe. Still talks about camping inside the house and how I cooked pork chops on a cast iron skillet in our fireplace, and the little bit of grocery shopping that I was able to do before Walmart started throwing everything out. We left it on our back patio because I think the warmest it got over that period during the day was maybe like 35 degrees. So that, I don't think it takes away all of your responsibility to take care of yourself and your family. Because if something like that were to happen again where the power goes out, yeah, one night, you can kind of do a little bit of camping in your house and, make it a fun little party. And then you hit the second night and you're wondering, when's the power going to come back on? And then you hit the third night and, food in your fridge and freezer are starting to go bad. And, the excess water that you had in your toilet, you've rationed, your flushes, and you've poured water into your tank to be able to flush your toilet, but now you're out of that. And maybe you're starting to smell a little bit because you haven't had a real shower in 72 hours. And by that fourth day, you're digging through your pantry and hoping that you have a mechanical can opener, and you're going to eat your SpaghettiOs cold. So that was a huge wake-up call for a lot of people. A lot of people have added things to their house in case, it ever gets that rough again, which the Farmer's Almanac says this winter is supposed to be a doozy. So if you haven't done any preparations for that, now's probably a good time. I have gotten almost a cord of wood for free from various people that either cut stuff because a tree got knocked down and they don't have fireplaces and they want it gone. Uh, helping friends and family clean up their property. And instead of them paying me, it's like, just help me put the wood in my vehicle and I will, count that as some payment. So it's definitely possible for you to not have to spend money to get firewood. Now, depending on when it was cut down, it might not be nice in season and it's going to take a bit longer to actually light. But, that's just something that we deal with. But having that wood is better than having no wood. But all that being said, I'm not seeing much else on this list that I think is important to us as preppers. Thank you for the 2 or 3 people that watched this first live stream that I've done in a while. I'm planning on doing 2 or 3 of these a week for 30 minutes to an hour, and I will take your questions. I might turn your questions into a standalone full-length video, or I'm probably just going to answer them here and now. But with that being said, if you have lasted this long, please consider liking, subscribing, sharing, and commenting on these videos. When you share it with your friends and family, you're letting them know that you care about them, because I give out all this information for free, and I do my best to make sure it's correct, or mostly correct, or at least an educated opinion. So that being said, I'm gonna get the rest of my work done, and y'all have a good rest of your evening.